I've got my analyst joining me this morning. The WhatsApp number is 0809 440 981. You can also tweet at Smooth981. And we're streaming the show live on YouTube as well. So you can catch the live stream. You can post a comment underneath that live stream. Search for us on YouTube. It's at Smooth981. Our analysts, good morning, Devoe, and good morning, Lakunle. Welcome.
Good morning, Lagos. Good morning, team. Eku, you get cash.
Okay.
Good morning, President Zibby. Good morning, Devoe. Good morning, the world.
All right, so we're starting off with Punch, and this has to do with the Naira crisis. Now, the surrounding issues with the design, with the Naira redesign, seem to have worsened. The central bank has not exactly clarified the legal tender status of the old notes, and this has caused some confusion across the country. So organizations are refusing the new Naira, banks, filling stations, and traders as well are refusing to accept the old currencies, I beg your pardon. However, the CBN governor yesterday ruled out any further extension of the deadline that had been stipulated for phasing out the old 1,500 and 200 Naira notes.
Well, it's a story that some people would put in local palace words. It gets worse and worse. It just hasn't taken some form of relief when it comes to this scarcity of Naira. I mean, we've gone from scarcity of PVCs to scarcity of fuel. Now at the top of the list, scarcity of our own legal tender called Naira. And from one phase to the other, we've seen all the, what I call it, dramatic reactions within the country, whereby people nationwide were actually not able to get the new notes pending the CBN's deadline that was shifted once to February 10th. Now, prior to this, we saw all the highlight events whereby APC, the governors forum met with the presidency, Justice Lee, and the CBN governor and the national security advisor to see whether they could get it shifted. That didn't take place. We also saw 3 state governments that through their attorney general, that was Kaduna, Zamfara, and Kogi. They sued the federal government with the CBN as an agent to shift the dates because of the implications and hardship it was bringing to Nigerians. We've also seen other four APC states join in that suit as well, including River states. We saw how clashes had erupted and maybe some level of unrest in some parts of the country, especially Ondo State, Edo State, Lagos, and a bit in Abuja, reacting both to the fuel and the Naira scarcity. Now, we've also seen the move by the Supreme Court in an ex parte injunction for the CBN to maintain status quo until they can review the matter. And since then, the federal government, through the Attorney General Malami, had responded. And despite that position, the February 10th came and the CBN, it seemed as if they carried on with the exercise. So what we saw was on that date, banks literally stopped collecting deposits and were referring people to deposits at the CBN as earlier instructed. We also saw the reaction in the markets, which is what this story is really about. Prior to that deadline, we noticed that the CBN had claimed that they had gotten about 2.7 trillion back in cash. And the issue here is that the distribution of the new notes, that's the 200, the 500, and the 1,000, literally has not been enough nationwide because they've only produced for about 400 billion of the new notes. And I think this is where the real crunch takes place, because at some point, whilst normally you could easily get your own money back at the bank or at the POS, both banks and POS were starved of cash. And then we saw a backlash in the rent-seeking situation, whereby Nigerians literally started selling naira, both the old and the new. And what we saw in averagely around the country, POS points that had cash were selling 5,000 naira for 1,000, 10,000 for 2,000. So if you want 20,000 naira, you're going to pay 4,000 naira for it. We saw this in so many ramifications, and this really pinched Nigerians all over, because not only did they have to pay so much just to get the cash that was theirs, they couldn't even find it easily as they used to before. I mean, I thought we had gotten accustomed to fuel queues. We now had to get accustomed to bank queues, and these were not just normal queues. These queues were fraught with a lot of agitation, fraught with a lot of tension, and in some cases, people got a bit violent. Now, the CBN thought that they had eased this position because in a meeting that they had with some diplomatic personnel recently, they were explaining that they had asked banks to pay across the counter, and they had also introduced the cash swap system for the rural areas. But the truth is, I mean, with 150,000 POS points around the nation, 30,000 super agents in rural areas just doesn't cut it. Also, it's fine that you allowed banks to pay the new notes across the counter, but many banks started informing their customers that they had not received sufficient cash. I mean, I went to my bank and they told me that they received X amount and that X amount finished in one day. So until a new batch comes, there's nothing to give. I mean, we also saw some banks that angry customers started attacking the staff and they had to either escape through the back. Some had police and military presence. Some had to start closing early or shutting their doors whenever they didn't have cash. I mean, the tension is still pursuant. But the real issue here is this. Many people are still of a strong reason that the objective of this Naira redesign, which many believe is targeted at stemming vote buying against the incoming election next week, may not have been implemented properly. Yes, the attempt to stop vote buying is noble. However, do Nigerian citizens, must we suffer? Must we go through hardships and more frustrations because of this? And this is why the pressure has mounted on the CBN to do something about it. I think, you know how they say, do not cut your face to, how do they say it? To spite your do not cut your nose to spite your face. Yes. So in trying to avoid vote buying or prevent it, the CBN should not literally take Nigerians through this hellfire simply because they want to. They're going to have to ensure, like the Council of State had agreed, I think whatever they need to do to pump more cash into the economy between now and the elections, they must do that. They must douse the tensions among Nigerian people, because I'm not sure, I don't know how much Nigerians can tolerate up until that time. Remember, we have seen that cash is king. All the bank apps and all the fintech companies, this scenario has tested their capacity to deliver the cashless system. And I wouldn't say it's failing, but it's not sufficient because people have gone through lots of frustrations, even trying to use that electronic side. And that's for those who have the capacity. Remember, it's not everybody that uses the electronic systems. So these are very strong lessons for us, but one thing is key. The CBN must pump more cash into the economy between now and elections to ensure that they douse the tensions that prevailed nationwide.
All right, thank you for that, Devoe. Shegun says those supporting the CBN in their refusal to obey the Supreme Court ruling will be screaming rule of law tomorrow. We Nigerians are an amusing lot. Everything just depends on what suits our narrative. And Lakunle, I want to come to you with this one, and this is from this day. So the presidency disclosed that neither the federal government nor the central bank had taken a preemptive position on the legality of the old notes, 200, 500, and 1,000. And in a statement, its spokesperson, Malam Garba Shehu, says the presidency says the federal government's position on the currency swap would be made public after the determination of that suit. And let's merge this with another story coming from Vanguard, where the CBN governor has threatened to arrest and jail POS agents charging above 200 naira for cash withdrawals.
All right, so it's amazing that we're having this kind of conversation in 2023. What is it about redesigning a currency for a country that we are finding so difficult to handle from day one? Whatever the objective may have been, whatever however how good it may have been in doing, which of course a lot of us bought into the reasoning for time. We've not done a currency redesign in close to 30 years. We've not done a few things. Then the need to reduce enough of cash, even for the economy, for whatever reason it is, for all the reasons that they're given, which were reasonable. But for the life of me, why do we make things so difficult to just get through? From day one, we always knew that the 100 days giving was never going to be it. We know that there's no single thing that we have done that involved the Nigerian people in totality that we have done that has been easy. Name it: population, polio vaccination. It took us almost 40 years to get people to get their children to get vaccinated for polio, NIM, and so on and so forth. We could have used any of these experiences to know that 100 days was never going to be enough. Having said that, now the government and the CBN says that they have not taken a preemptive position. In the first instance, why do they need to be going to court? We have turned everything into politics. And now, yesterday, I hear in the news that the governor of Kano State closed a certain shop because the shop refused to accept the old notes. And I hear that that supermarket is one of the biggest in Kano. So and he says that he's also threatening that any other person that he knows or hears or catches not accepting it is going to face some form of sanction. So the question then is then that, what is the business of a governor with the monetary policy of a country? It is not economic policy, it is monetary policy. I want to change the design and feel and look of a naira. That's the business of the central bank and the federal government. The federal government has the power over what's legal tender in this country. The state governors have no business interfering. All they could have done was to, how do you say it? To persuade the federal government and the CBN to do the right thing. We know what the right things to be done. But we're just so good with this ego thing. Now it's in court. We do not know whether the president promised an extra 10 days, 7 days. Those 7 days have expired. Now it's in court. The court will give a time that is convenient for it to hear the case, just like they've done. They said, don't cancel, don't enforce your deadline, but I would sit on the 15th. So 15th is today. So we are having to go with the end of day today to hear whatever that outcome is. The court in its wisdom might say, I'm adjourning for another 30 days. So we'll continue to be in this state of limbo until then. So we know the right things to do. And I'm amazed that the leadership of this country don't see how difficult situations they have put people. Just like Devoe mentioned, I had suffered this same thing. I needed to travel out of Lagos, and I decided that the fuel problem was there. And I said, okay, it's easier for me. Let me transfer the problem of fueling to somebody else. I'll go by public transport. I got to the park, and I said, can I do transfer to you? They went and brought me a POS person. The one collected 4,000 from me to give me 20,000. You know, so it is there out there. It is not that they said. It happened to me just last week. And you know the number of people who do this. We can talk about electronic transfer, blah, 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 blah. Yes, it is there for those people who have access to it. The majority of people, there are many of these people who don't even have bank accounts, right? So how do they transact businesses in the meantime while we're having this argument about whether it is valid, it is not valid, we're going to court, we're going to court. And then the governor of the central bank now calls in the diplomatic corps and explaining to them, pray, When last did the United Kingdom, when they were doing their own currency design, call diplomatic corps in London to come and sit down and be pleading to them to do something for them? I think the CBN governor should face his job. His job is to manage and plan a monetary policy that will make the economic policy as planned by the government to work for the people of this country. We have seen too much of him on the pages of newspaper, on TV and in radio, much more than he's doing his real work. And this is the first time this is probably the first or second time we are having a central bank governor so visible to our faces. Is even more popular than some of our state governors, as it were. In years past, the only places where you see the name of the central bank governor is on the face of the currency itself. So we need to tell these people to know that people are out there suffering and they need to get off their high horses and do the right things.
All right, Jim via WhatsApp says the Supreme Court didn't tell the CBN, as the CBN wasn't before it. It told the federal government. The missing link is the president's calling on the CBN to halt per the order of the Supreme Court. Just because it was announced doesn't mean CBN should comply. That is not how the law should work. And that's from Jim. Godwin says, is the CBN governor above the law? And another message from Charles Money says, Nigerians are becoming more frustrated with the Naira policy. It's almost resulted in fights at Oshodi BRT stations as the ticketing fellas are rejecting the old notes. Only the yellow buses help and accept the old notes. Adiola says, for the record, the CBN has inadvertently made cash the super king, as it will take a generation for the cashless or cashless to be acceptable and meaningful. And Dadok says there's a trending video of a politician alleging some amounts of money in a sitting governor's home. Well, that is just speculation until there's actually evidence to prove that. But let's take a quick break. And when we return, we'll continue the conversation. This is Freshly Pressed on Smooth 98.1. You first. Smooth.
Smoother than a fresh jar of Zibby. Enter with your change. Because
I won't wait one trouble with you. Thank God this residency did not join
I
in.
don't tell you before, say I don't get
Sorry?
change. You show me this one.
I said it is 1 week, one trouble we did. Thank God this residency people problem no join now.
Oh, wow.
I look cheap to you. How dare you?
Hey, buddy. See English. Yeah, I know they post you. I know.
So we've got about 10 more minutes. So we'll just try to move through the stories as quickly as we can, so we can take a bit more.
Yeah, short.
Okay.
Sorry for yourself.
You too can activate a First Money wallet and receive cash, make transfers, pay bills, and lots more, all with your phone number. Simply download the First Money wallet app or dial *894*1# to enjoy boundless transaction with or without data.
Thank you.
All right, we're going back on.
All money now on First Money. You first. First Bank. It's the Breakfast Crew on your radio.
Smooth 98.1. This is Freshly Pressed. We're looking at the stories from the papers here in Nigeria. To be a part of the conversation, let us know what your thoughts are. 0809 440 981. That is the WhatsApp number. You can also tweet at Smooth981 or post a comment underneath the live stream. It's up on YouTube at Smooth981. And let's move on to a story from Business Day. Now, the Lagos state government has prohibited all articulated trucks from using the Ojuelegba and Dorman Long bridges. And this is in an effort to reduce the loss of lives and property in the state. Now, this ban was communicated in a letter signed by Shola Giwa, who's the special advisor to the Ministry of Transportation, to the general manager of ALASMA. Now, if you recall, on the 29th of January, there was a road accident which happened after a container-laden truck fell off the bridge, crushing a commercial bus. 9 people were reported to have lost their lives in that accident and several more injured.
Yes, as painful as that sounds, we've had a history of several truck collapses around that Ojuelegba axis, the bridge axis across the Dorman Long Bridge, and in other parts of town, as well as other parts of the country. Now, being an issue that affects the state government has moved to take a measure to kind of prevent this, because it seems as if the bridge seems to be, would we call it steep? However, it also seems that they've not been able to control buses and how they're not properly strapped, trucks, articulated trucks, how they're not strapped properly when they're crossing that bridge. So in a move to prevent this, they have now restricted trucks from passing across the bridge. So trucks must now either pass under the bridge or take the Oshodi Expressway route. Now, the problem here is that whilst we're trying to address one problem, I think we may have created another problem which may bring greater frustration to road users, both private and commercial users. Now, let's take the first option. If the articulated truck, remember, these are usually 18-wheelers, very long, and there are many of them. If they are not going to pass that bridge, Ojialegba is an intersection point. If you've ever passed the underbridge, you will know that it's even difficult for smaller cars and buses because of all the human traffic and traders who are on that junction. So if you're now moving articulated trucks under the junction, and remember, there's also a traffic light there, it means we're going to begin to see another kind of queuing present under the Ojuelegba Bridge, which will now create its own tension for road users. That's one. Secondly, most trucks do not pass the Oshodi Apapa routes because of all the already existing traffic jams that are on that route. This was supposed to be like a secondary outlet for them. So now disallowing them to cross over that bridge, well, I'm sure they've started to enforce it, but what it means is that we're going to now start entertaining more traffic jams because of this move. That's one. What I would have said is that Lagos being not being the major commercial city, having the biggest ports in West Africa, Lagos will need to look at more strategic options. And I don't know whether, yes, it will come at a cost, but I think Lagos can turn it into some kind of cost-bearing projects, either by creating some kind of train system that will move goods out to a point outside the commercial city so that trucks can pick up from that point and move on, or maybe develop the, I don't know if they need to do some dredging. I know they've completed the deep sea ports at Lekki, so maybe trucks and containers may be able to disembark from that end. But the idea is this move, though temporary, may create more frustrations for road users in the long run in the bid to prevent this unsafe situation.
All right, the WhatsApp number is 0809 444 0981. Abbas says the CBN governor is wrong. He doesn't have money to inject into the banks, yet he's stopping the use of old notes. Most banks have shut down their services because of the fear of being attacked by angry customers. People are suffering, yet some are being political about it. He needs to know that the pressure that reduced was because of the court judgment. People hoped things would change. The governor's business is that the CBN governor would not be there if violence erupts. We saw this in Ogun State where people protested and nearly burned some banks. And Yinka says, shouldn't there be a stay of execution? Message from Godwin. Godwin says, the governor, Ganduje, is only protecting his people from hardships. Let's move on to The Guardian. Now, the Nigerian Association of Resident Doctors deferred its proposed nationwide strike, and they've come out to say the federal government has met more than 50% of their demands.
Right. So, like I jokingly said before while we're on break, Nigeria is a typical case of this storybook, 1 week, one trouble. Every week, there is one trouble, there's one issue that comes up If you ever read that book, Wilson Tagbo, I would never forget the name. Every week he was always in trouble in high school, and that's what he thinks we are in Nigeria. But thank God that at least for now we have averted this strike by the National Association of Resident Doctors. 50% of their money has been paid, they've collected. The monies had been outstanding since 2014 and up to date in various tranches. And thank God that they have paid them. But there's also the other thing in the room that is fighting about governments claiming that they pay 90% of their training, and the NRD saying it's not true. And the Council of Pharmacists, represented by the president, says, yes, it is true, but they don't do that for other practitioners in the medical industry. And this is part of the things that the government needs to see and put the medical industry in one pool and treat everybody in that pool on the same level, so that when you treat and solve the problem of the doctors, the pharmacists don't go on strike. And when you answer the pharmacists, the nurses don't go on strike. So we need to pull all of these things together and solve it together, not in piecemeal as we are seem to be doing.
All right, let's take a few messages. Deji says, while passing under prevents containers from falling, the people under the bridge will now be in danger. Tayo says, instead of putting a barricade to prevent articulated trucks, I'm seeing a display of letter writing skills. It's better for it to be difficult than dangerous. And let's move on to one story. We've got just about a minute and we'll see if we can get this done. Now, the president has made a special appeal for the lifting of the blanket visa ban placed on Nigerians by the government of the UAE.
Well, the president in the inauguration of the transition committee put a call through to the, I think, Sheikh El Zayed of the UAE, that's the Emirate superintendent for Dubai. And he was appealing on the, while he was condoling with the loss of his mother-in-law, that diplomatic and foreign relations be enhanced. Two issues came to light. One was the visa ban on Nigerians, which he asked the Sheikh to reconsider to ensure that the mutual relationship that the bilateral countries enjoyed would improve, and then also the opening of Emirates back into the country. I'm sure many Dubai travelers, especially those who haven't been there, who have been cut off with the visa ban. And the visa ban initially was for those who were under 30. They now raised it to those who were under 40, which is the bulk of people who want to travel. However, I hope that the UAE takes a second look on Buhari's appeal, so that our intending travelers can get to Dubai in time.
All right, well, that's all the time that we have for Freshly Pressed this morning. Thank you for listening, and thanks to our analysts Devoe and Lakunle for joining us this morning.
Right.
Do stay with us. There is a lot more to come on the Smooth Breakfast.
First, that.
Why are you laughing? Why are you laughing?